Hey, it's your history homie Howser, and today we're in my hometown of Huntington Park, or HP as we call it. Growing up here, there were buildings that fascinated me and places that hold special memories. And today I'm going to take you on a tour of 3 of those spots and learn their history here on Californiography. Howser. Our first stop is here on Soto and 57th Streets. As a kid, the building behind me always fascinated me with its unique architecture, so I had to dig into its history. And it turns out it was once the headquarters of a company called Lane Wells that was a key player in the California oil industry and beyond.
In the early 1930s, the demand for oil was rising, but oil prices were low. The cost to explore and produce oil were very high, and oil companies needed a more cost-effective way to find more oil. In 1930, 2 ambitious oil field tool salesmen named Bill Lane and Walt Wells came up with the idea for a gun-like tool that would shoot steel bullets through the casings of dry wells in order to extract more oil. During their research, they discovered that a patent for a similar tool already existed, but the design didn't work. Lane and Wells purchased the patent from the inventor and formed the Lane Wells Company in 1932 to develop their own gun perforator. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you that I know all the details about how this gun perforator worked. In a nutshell, they would lower the tool into a well that was thought to be dry. It would shoot bullets into the sides of the well casing and into the earth, which would reveal oil pockets, which would then cause the well that was previously thought to be dry to produce more oil. The first test of their gun perforator was carried out in December of 1932 on a well called La Merced No. 17 in Montebello that was owned by Union Oil. The perforation brought the well back from producing nothing to 40 barrels of oil a day. The success of that first test immediately resulted in demand and growth for the company. They expanded their services and established locations in Texas and Oklahoma soon after. By 1935, they had a small fleet of perforating trucks that could be dispatched to wells all over the country. Their success led Lane Wells to build a company headquarters and factory on Soto Street in 1938 at a cost of $100,000. The Streamline modern building was designed by architect William E. Mayer, who described the headquarters building as having rounded corners and 3 large continuous glass areas that give the building a strong horizontal feeling, but the tall pylons provide interesting contrast at the entrance. Lane Wells continued growing in the following decade, establishing several international locations and continuing to refine their services and the design of the gun perforator. By 1948, the company completed their 100,000th perforating service at the well that started it all, La Merced No. 17. In 1956, Dresser Industries merged with Lane Wells, and in 1958, Lane Wells moved their operation to Houston, eventually becoming part of oil giant Baker Hughes, leaving their beautiful Streamline modern headquarters to have a succession of tenants in the ensuing decades. Today, the building houses the Escarpment, a studio with 2 stages and equipment and prop rentals. The exterior can definitely use some TLC, but you can still appreciate the streamlined modern architecture of the building, the metal handiwork encircling the rounded windows, and the 4 cascading columns that seem to pour over the front entrance of the building.
Even though I don't live in HP anymore, anytime I'm visiting family, I'll always take a little detour just to check on this building. We don't have many examples of this type of architecture that still exists, and I hope that it'll be around for many more years to come. Our next stop brings us to Pacific Boulevard, or La Pacific, as those of us who grew up here call it. This street has always been the hub of the city's activity, with its significance dating back to the time before Huntington Park was even a city.
The land that would become Huntington Park was once part of Rancho San Antonio, 29,000 acres of land that were granted in 1810 to Don Antonio Maria Lugo. In the middle and latter part of the 19th century, the Lugo family began selling portions of the rancho. In 1899, a pair of real estate developers named A.O. Burbank and E.V. Baker began buying up land, and by 1901, they controlled a 100-acre tract called the Sunrise Tract. They began subdividing the land and renamed their development to La Park. But in 1902, they changed the name to Huntington Park to entice Henry Huntington to extend the line of his Pacific Electric Railway through the city. Their flattery worked, and Huntington extended his Wheatery Line in 1903 through the city along what is now Randolph Street. Throughout all of this development, the road that would become Pacific Boulevard was taking shape. The road from the Lugo Ranch House to the city of Los Angeles had been well traveled, and it was natural for it to become a major street in the city. Water troughs were placed along the stretch of road, and many of the important buildings were built alongside it, including the first grocery store in 1903, which also housed the first post office, and later, the first newspaper in the city. Huntington Park's civic leaders were determined to have Pacific Boulevard be a major draw along the thoroughfare from Los Angeles to Long Beach, and they worked with neighboring cities to improve the road's condition and to secure the right-of-way from various landowners. In 1906, Huntington Park was incorporated as a city with a population of 526, and its development, as well as Pacific Boulevards, continued to grow. In 1909, the Women's Improvement Club raised money to build the new cement trough and drinking fountain on Pacific Boulevard, which helped bring horse-drawn vehicles from other cities through Huntington Park. By 1911, Pacific had been paved, and when it came time to build a city hall in 1914, it was naturally located on the boulevard at the corner of Irvington Avenue, which later became Gage Avenue. By the 1920s, Pacific began to take shape as the commercial and entertainment hub of the city, with 2 movie theaters being built less than a block from each other and a third being added on the next block in 1930. The 1933 Long Beach earthquake damaged and destroyed a lot of the buildings along Pacific, but the boulevard rebounded. In 1946, the city's first Christmas parade was held, and the tradition has continued to the present day. By the 1950s, department stores like Woolworths, Weinmann's, JCPenney, and Montgomery Ward's opened locations, which made Pacific the hub of retail shopping for Southeast LA. The city painted banners on its water towers that proudly proclaimed that Huntington Park had more shops than a shopping center. However, by the 1960s, Pacific began to experience a decline with the advent of regional shopping centers and air-conditioned malls. The railways that had once made a trip to the city convenient also ceased operations, and the white working-class residents, which had been the predominant demographic since the beginning of the city, moved away in droves to communities like Cerritos, Downey, and towns in Orange County. Vacancies of storefronts on Pacific rose to 20%, and by the 1970s, it seemed like the boulevard was on the verge of demise. But in the mid-1970s, Pacific was revived by an influx of working-class Latinos and immigrants to Huntington Park and surrounding cities like Bell, Maywood, and Southgate. These new residents tended to shop locally, and that infusion of cash soon had Pacific Boulevard bustling again. In the 1990s, Pacific Boulevard became as known for soccer celebrations that sometimes got out of hand as it did for its shopping. But that reputation didn't stop the boulevard from continuing to flourish, becoming the 3rd highest grossing commercial district in LA County by 2008. However, in recent years, Pacific Boulevard has again experienced a downturn. Big box stores and shopping centers open nearby. The shift to online shopping also greatly affected Pacific, which has largely been dependent on foot traffic. Additionally, the younger generation and children of immigrants don't tend to like the same things as their parents did, and many of the offerings on the boulevard just don't appeal to them. And finally, the shutdowns during 2020 were the last straw for many of the businesses. Today, there is noticeably smaller foot traffic, even on weekends, and many storefronts still remain closed. But the city leaders have invested millions of dollars into a redevelopment project to give Pacific a facelift and make it look and feel more modern. They've installed new street signs, lighting, and trees along the boulevard, and added a giant electronic billboard at one end of Pacific.
Civic leaders are trying to find a way to reinvent Pacific Boulevard to make it more appealing to younger Latinos, while also preserving some of its cultural past, which is a difficult task, but if history has taught us anything, is that Pacific Boulevard always finds a way to bounce back. Our next and final stop is Avila's El Ranchito. As a kid, it was always a special treat whenever we got a chance to eat at this restaurant, which has been serving the community for almost 60 years and is a true American dream story. Don Salvador Avila came to the United States as a bracero in the 1940s, working in the fields of Central California. His wife, Doña Margarita, stayed in Pénjamo, Guanajuato to raise their 6 children. In 1958, the entire Avila family moved to the U.S., putting down roots in Southeast LA, where Salvador found work in a foundry. A back injury forced him from that job, but also led him to an opportunity that would shape his family's future. In 1966, the Avilas bought a failing Cuban cafe next to a liquor store in Huntington Park with a $2,000 loan that was co-signed by Salvador's uncle. Neither he or Margarita had ever run a restaurant, but they had her recipes and his determination to create a legacy for his family. The first day they opened, they only made $13, but the family persevered.
and it most certainly was a family affair. Margarita's father washed dishes, while her mother helped her in the kitchen. Salvador would drive 3 times a week at dawn to buy fresh produce in downtown LA, and the Avila children would help serve food and clear tables when they returned home from school. The Avilas opened the restaurant at a perfect time. Huntington Park and the surrounding cities were about to go through a dramatic demographic shift, going from majority white to predominantly Latino. Many Mexican immigrants became regulars because the cooking reminded them of home. The Avilas soon bought out the liquor store next door and expanded their restaurant, which had only 5 picnic tables when they first opened. As their children became adults, they persuaded their parents to open more Avilas and Ranchitos in other cities in LA and Orange counties in the 1970s. Don Salvador Avila helped his children start their own locations based on his concept, but he didn't want partners. He lent them the El Ranchito name, seed money, and the menu, but it was up to them to make it work. As one of his sons said in an interview, "By keeping it that way, we can still have peace in the house and still talk to each other. We don't have partnership problems." Even though the restaurants were separate, the siblings still cooperated with each other to buy in bulk, develop menus, and arrange things like insurance. Each sibling also had a strength that the others could call on for help. This arrangement allowed them to keep family unity, a guiding principle that their father Salvador lived his life by. By the 1980s, Salvador and Margarita were able to move to a hilltop estate in Corona del Mar, and almost all of their children moved in nearby. Over the following decades, Avila's El Ranchito grew to 13 locations, with all but the original one being in Orange County. Each location is owned and operated by a second or third generation family member. And even though Doña Margarita's recipes are the foundation of the restaurants, each location caters its menu to its local clientele, like Mahi Mahi Ceviche in Newport Beach, an Aji Bowl in Laguna Beach, or traditional dishes like Lengua Ranchera at the original Huntington Park location. Doña Margarita sadly passed away in 2016 and Don Salvador in 2022, but their legacy lives on. They accomplished the American dream. Don Salvador not only went from bracero to millionaire, but also created opportunities for his children and grandchildren to succeed in this country. So next time you're in the mood for some hand-style Mexican cooking, why not pay a visit to Avila's Ranchito and ensure that the legacy that Don Salvador and Doña Margarita created continues to live on for many more years to come. Thank you for joining me on today's trip to my hometown to learn the history behind a few of my favorite historic spots. Please make sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Until next time when we, because remember, it's you and me, continue to explore the history that could be found in this great big backyard of ours called California. All right, see you soon.